There's a bottle sitting in your shower right now that you don't think about at all. You squeeze some out, work it through your hair, rinse, done, maybe 8 seconds total, and you're already thinking about something else before the water's even off. But that 8-second habit is younger than your grandmother. And for most of human history, people solved the exact same problem, greasy, dirty, itchy hair, with something so much stranger, it's hard to believe it actually worked. So what did people do before shampoo existed? And here's the part that should stop you. Some of it wasn't just gross. It might have worked better than we want to admit. Let's start small. In ancient Egypt, wealthy people shaved their heads completely bald and wore wigs instead, according to records studied by Egyptologists at the University of Manchester. Bald skin under a wig is a lot easier to keep clean than a full head of hair in 40-degree heat. Think of it like swapping a shag carpet for tile. Problem solved, sort of. So what about everyone who kept their actual hair? That's where it gets stranger. Ancient Roman texts, including ones referenced by the historian Pliny the Elder, describe using stale urine as a hair-setting agent. Not by accident, on purpose. Urine breaks down into ammonia, which is a genuinely effective degreaser, the same basic chemistry in some modern cleaning products. Imagine your styling gel, except it came from a jar that sat outside for a week. Rome ran on it.
And it wasn't just Rome improvising with whatever was on hand. Across parts of the ancient Mediterranean, oil was the default, not water. Olive oil, sometimes scented with crushed herbs, was worked through hair to keep it looking glossy in climates with no indoor plumbing to speak of. Glossy is doing a lot of work in that sentence, though, because back then, glossy also meant coated in a thin film that trapped dust, sweat, and whatever else drifted by. A shine you'd photograph today was, back then, basically a dirt magnet with good lighting. So what happens when bathing culture disappears entirely? You get the Middle Ages. For a good stretch of medieval Europe, regular washing was actively discouraged, partly out of religious modesty, partly out of a real fear that open pores let disease in. Archaeologists have recovered medieval combs with two sides, one wide for detangling, one narrow enough to physically drag out lice eggs glued to individual hair strands. That's not a comb. That's a small wooden crime scene. So how do you go weeks without washing and still look presentable? You cheat. By the 1700s, powdered wigs were everywhere, and underneath them, people rubbed a paste of flour and animal fat directly onto their scalp and real hair to keep the style locked in place, sometimes for weeks at a stretch. Warm, moist, undisturbed. Some accounts from the period describe wig wearers noticing small creatures living inside the style itself, not as a rare horror story, but as a known enough problem that specialized long-handled scratching sticks were sold for exactly that purpose, built thin enough to slide under the wig without knocking the whole architecture sideways. If you're picturing something living in there, you're right. We covered exactly how bad that got in our last video, so if you want the full horror story, it's linked below. Here's where the story stops being just gross and starts being genuinely interesting. So does any of this ever get better? Sort of. By the Victorian era, people started using beaten egg yolks to cut grease from their scalp, since the proteins bind to oil and rinse out clean, and some historians estimate middle and upper class Victorians washed their hair as rarely as once a month. Once a month? Try explaining that to your gym locker room. Doctors of the period genuinely worried that washing hair too often could weaken it or cause a chill severe enough to make someone sick, which meant the dirty is dangerous logic ran completely backwards from what we'd assume today. In 2014, a science journalist and physician named James Hamblin, who trained at Yale School of Public Health and now writes about medicine for The Atlantic, publicly stopped washing his hair and body with soap entirely as an experiment. Not for a week, for years. He documented it, tested his own skin bacteria, and found that his skin's oil production actually stabilized over time instead of spiraling into a greasy mess. His argument, backed by dermatology researchers studying the skin microbiome, was that constant washing might be stripping away a balance your body works hard to maintain on its own. Suddenly, the medieval peasant with a lice comb doesn't sound ignorant. He sounds like he was decades ahead of a Yale-trained physician, and that maybe your daily shampoo habit is the weird one, not his. Except here's where it gets complicated. Your scalp's sebaceous glands do react to washing. That part is real and it's not controversial. When you strip oil away constantly, your glands can ramp up production to compensate, which is a documented feedback loop dermatologists refer to as sebum rebound. And it's the actual mechanism behind why your hair feels greasier faster once you get used to washing daily.
But hair itself isn't skin. The strand you're washing is dead keratin. No blood supply, no living cells, no microbiome debate to be had, because there's no biology up there left to protect. Hamblin's research, and the research it's built on, is specifically about the skin's bacterial ecosystem, not about the dead fiber growing out of it. The part that holds up is about skin. The part people stretch to include hair is where the science quietly stops backing you up. The boring, well-supported answer is that modern shampoo exists because industrial life changed how much oil, pollution, styling residue, and product buildup collects on hair daily, not because your ancestors' unwashed scalp was secretly optimized and yours is somehow broken. So that mostly wraps it up, except for one thing that still doesn't add up cleanly. Lice infestations across Europe didn't decline gradually alongside the rise of regular hair washing, the way you'd expect if cleanliness was the deciding factor. Public health records show the sharpest drops happened earlier, tied more closely to changes in wig wearing and clothing habits, and to broader shifts in household crowding than to shampoo itself, which wasn't even formulated specifically for hair until the early 1900s. Shampoo, in other words, showed up late to a party that was already winding down. So if it wasn't washing that solved the lice problem, and fashion alone doesn't explain the timing either, what actually broke the cycle first is something historians and epidemiologists still go back and forth on, and nobody's fully nailed it down. It's probably just shampoo doing what shampoo does, cutting oil and buildup that our modern, product-heavy, pollution-heavy lives create in the first place. But maybe there's a version of this where your great-great-grandparents' greasy, egg yolk-rinsed, occasionally lice-ridden hair was running on a system your body still half remembers, quietly, every time you skip a wash day, and it doesn't feel as disgusting as it should. Speaking of things that don't feel as disgusting as they should, if you liked this one, you already know we opened the lid on wigs a few videos back in Why Did Everyone Wear Wigs in the 1700s? It's not what you think, which is basically the prequel to everything your scalp just went through here. Go watch that one if you enjoy feeling itchy for educational purposes. And since apparently we can't stop asking questions nobody needed answered, drop the next one in the comments. What weird, mundane thing are you tired of not understanding? We will absolutely turn it into a video, so choose wisely. Or don't, and let us suffer through your worst idea.